The alarm screamed through the bridge of the U.E.S.A. Defiant as Commander Jake Morrison watched the impossible happen. Space itself seemed to tear apart above Mars, and through the rips came ships unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They looked alive, pulsing with veins of green light that ran along their dark surfaces like blood through arteries. "Sir, we're counting at least 40 vessels," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker, his voice tight with fear. "They're massive. The largest one is 3 miles long." Jake gripped the rail of his command platform. 20 years in the Space Navy had not prepared him for this moment. First contact with alien life was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement. Instead, it felt like watching death itself arrive at their doorstep. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. "All frequencies." The response came immediately, but not through their communication systems. The voice spoke directly into their minds, cold and emotionless, like ice water poured into their skulls. "We are the Zeth Kai Collective. We have come to add your species to our unity. You will submit. Resistance brings only suffering." On the main screen, the alien ships began to move. They did not fly like human vessels with engines and thrusters. They glided through space like living creatures swimming through water. Pods began to separate from the larger ships, hundreds of them, all heading toward the human colonies below. "Get me strategic command," Jake barked. "Then somebody wake up the president." 3 hours later, the nightmare began in earnest. The colonies on Mars were the first to fall silent. Then Europa. Then the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Each time, the pattern was the same. The alien pods would land, release clouds of glowing spores, and within minutes, the human voices would stop. Dr. Lisa Park received the emergency call while working late in her laboratory on Luna Base. As Earth's top expert on alien biology, she had spent years dreaming of this moment. She had imagined peaceful contact, scientific exchange, maybe even friendship between species. She had not imagined this. "We need you to study these," said Admiral Kevin Cross, his face grim on the video screen. "We managed to get some samples before New Geneva went dark." The samples arrived in sealed containers marked with every biohazard symbol known to science. Lisa put on her protective suit and entered the isolation chamber. What she found made her stomach turn. The spores were beautiful in their own terrible way. They moved like tiny jellyfish, pulsing with soft blue light. But when she placed them under the microscope, she saw the truth. They were not just organisms. They were machines, biological computers, designed to rewrite the human brain. "They're not trying to kill us," she whispered into her recorder. "They're trying to change us." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Admiral Kevin Cross coordinated humanity's response from the bridge of the battleship, Titan. He was a man who had spent his life preparing for war, but not this kind of war. "How you fight an enemy that turns your own people against you? Launch the nuclear missiles," he ordered. "Target the largest ship." The missiles streaked through space, each one carrying enough power to level a city. They struck the alien vessel dead center, and for a moment the bridge crew cheered. Then they watched in horror as the ship absorbed. The explosion, its veins of light growing brighter as it fed on the nuclear energy. "Sir," reported Captain Ryan Bell, "conventional weapons are useless. They're actually making them stronger." On the alien flagship, something that had once been a peaceful creature from a distant world now served as Hive Commander Kethron. It felt the satisfaction of the collective as another species fell before them. 17 worlds had already joined their unity. Humanity would be the 18th. But as the first human minds began to merge with the collective, Kethron felt something wrong. The human thoughts were not peaceful like the others. They were full of violence, anger, and something else. Something that made the collective recoil in fear. "What is this?" Kethron asked the collective mind. "Why do their thoughts burn?" The response came as a wave of confusion and pain. The human minds were not integrating properly. Instead of joining the peaceful unity, they were fighting back, and their resistance was spreading through the collective like poison. Back on Earth, the president addressed the world. "We face extinction," she said, her voice calm despite the terror in her eyes. "But we will not go quietly. We will fight with everything we have." Jake Morrison stood at his post as the alien ships moved closer to Earth. He thought of his daughter, safe in the bunkers below, and made a silent promise. Whatever these creatures wanted from humanity, they would find that humans were not easy prey. The first phase of the war was over. Humanity had lost every battle. But as the alien spores began to change the first human victims, something unexpected happened. The collective, which had conquered 17 peaceful species, was about to learn what made humans different. They were about to discover that some prey bites back. 3 weeks after the first attack, Dr. Lisa Park made a discovery that changed everything. She had been working without sleep, studying the infected humans who had been brought to her secret laboratory beneath Luna Base. What she found should have been impossible. The infected colonists were not dead. They were not mindless drones either. They were something new, something that made her hands shake as she recorded her findings. "Subject 7 shows complete spore integration," she whispered into her recorder. "But neural patterns remain independent. The subject retains human consciousness while displaying enhanced physical capabilities. This should not be possible according to collective behavior patterns." Subject 7 had been a farmer named Bill Davis from the Mars colony. Now he sat in his containment cell, looking exactly like a human, except for the faint blue lines that ran under his skin like veins of light. When Lisa spoke to him, he answered in his own voice, with his own memories intact. "I can hear them," Bill said, his eyes focused on something far away. "The whole collective. But they can't control me. Something's wrong with their system. It's like they're screaming." 2,000 miles away, Captain Ryan Bell led his team through the ruins of New Geneva Colony. They expected to find empty buildings and alien creatures. Instead, they found a war zone. The dome structures were intact, but the streets were filled with the bodies of dead aliens. "Sir, you need to see this," called Sergeant Linda Hayes from inside the colony's main building. Ryan followed her voice and found something that made no sense. The colony's meeting hall had been turned into a makeshift command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with alien ship positions and attack plans. At the center of it all sat a woman Ryan recognized as Mayor Kate Wilson. "Captain Bell," Kate said without looking up from her tactical display. "Good timing. We were just planning our next strike." Ryan stared at her. Kate looked human, but the blue lines under her skin told a different story. She had been infected, but she was still herself. More than that, she was leading a resistance movement. "How many of you are there?" Ryan asked. "Every human in the colony," Kate replied. "The spores changed us, but not the way they planned. We can access their network, but they can't control us. Better yet, we're driving them insane." To prove her point, Kate pressed her hand against a captured alien communication device. Immediately, the speakers filled with sounds of panic and confusion from the collective. Alien voices screamed in languages Ryan could not understand, but the terror was universal. "We're showing them things," Kate explained with a smile that was both human and something else. "Human history, human wars, human creativity in causing pain. They never evolved to handle thoughts like ours." On the alien flagship, Hive Commander Kethron writhed in agony. The peaceful unity of the collective was breaking apart as human memories flooded through their shared consciousness. Images of ancient battlefields, modern warfare, and psychological torture, techniques burned through minds that had never known such concepts. The collective had absorbed 17 species over the centuries. All of them had been peaceful, cooperative, beings who welcomed unity. They had never encountered a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of violence and deception. "Make it stop," Kethron pleaded to the central mind. "Their thoughts are poison. They are showing us things that should not exist." But the central mind could not make it stop. The human neural patterns were too different, too chaotic. Every human the collective tried to absorb brought more violent memories, more creative forms of cruelty, more psychological warfare techniques that had been refined over millennia of human conflict. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Cross received reports that seemed too good to be true. An alien advance had stopped. Their ships were retreating from several colonies. Some vessels had gone completely silent. "It's working," he said to his staff officers. "Whatever's happening to them, it's working." Dr. Park's latest report explained the phenomenon. The Zethkai collective was designed for peaceful species with simple, cooperative thought patterns. Human minds were evolved for survival in a hostile world, filled with paranoia, aggression, and the ability to imagine new ways to harm enemies. The spores were supposed to integrate human consciousness into their system, Lisa explained in her video report. Instead, human consciousness is integrating the collective into our system. We're not becoming them. They're becoming us. The infected humans were proving this point across the colonies. They retained their human personalities, but gained access to alien biotechnology and the ability to communicate across vast distances. More importantly, they were using the collective's own network against them, broadcasting human concepts of warfare, revenge, and psychological manipulation directly into alien minds that had no defense against such ideas. Captain Bell watched as the infected colonists planned their next move. They were no longer defending themselves. They were hunting their former captors with a combination of human cunning and alien enhancement that terrified even their human allies. The prey had become the predator, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to teach other species about survival. Dr. Amy Torres had spent her entire career studying dead languages and alien communication patterns. She never thought her work would become the key to humanity's survival. But as she sat in the underground bunker beneath Strategic Command, translating intercepted alien messages, she realized she was reading the death screams of an entire civilization. "Admiral Cross, you need to hear this," Amy said, her voice trembling as she played back the translated communications. "The collective is not just retreating, they're falling apart." The recording filled the room with alien voices speaking in panic. Amy had translated their words into simple English, but the terror needed no translation. The human thoughts spread like fire through our unity. We cannot stop the burning. Our peaceful minds cannot process their violence. 17 worlds cry out in pain as their absorbed species remember war. Admiral Cross leaned forward in his chair. "What does that mean?" "Exactly? It means every species the collective ever absorbed is waking up," Amy explained. "The human neural patterns are so violent and chaotic that they're breaking the mental controls that kept other species obedient. Across 17 worlds, previously peaceful aliens are remembering how to fight." General Paul Carter had been waiting 30 years for this moment. Not the alien invasion, but the chance to use humanity's darkest weapons. As head of Special Projects Division, he controlled secrets that most world leaders did not know existed. "It's time," he told his assistant, Colonel Alex Morgan. "Authorize Project Nightmare. All protocols are now active." Project Nightmare had been developed during the coldest days of human conflicts, when psychologists and military strategists worked together to create weapons that attacked the mind instead of the body. Mimetic warfare, psychological viruses, cognitive attacks designed to destroy enemy morale and mental stability. The project had been shelved after the last major war, deemed too dangerous for use against other humans. But the collective was not human, and their hive mind made them the perfect target for psychological warfare on a massive scale. The infected human colonies became testing grounds for these weapons. Linda Hayes, the former Marine sergeant who now led the resistance on New Geneva, received her new orders with a smile that would have terrified her old commanding officers. "We're not just fighting back anymore," she told her hybrid human team. "We're going to teach them what real warfare looks like." The humans began broadcasting carefully crafted psychological attacks through the collective's own communication network. Images of human history's worst moments, enhanced with alien biotechnology to make them more vivid and traumatic. Concepts of individual identity and rebellion, designed to break apart hive mind unity. Mathematical equations that proved the futility of peaceful existence in a hostile universe. But the most effective weapon was simpler than any high-tech, psychological virus. It was human creativity in causing suffering, shared directly from mind to mind. On the collective flagship, Hive Commander Kethron experienced something no member of their species had ever felt: the desire to hurt others. The human memories, flooding through the network, showed 1,000 different ways to cause pain, to break enemies, to make others suffer for the pleasure of watching them suffer. "This is not natural," Kethron screamed to the central mind. "These thoughts are not thoughts. They are weapons disguised as memories." The central mind could not respond. It was too busy trying to contain the spreading chaos as human concepts of war, torture, and psychological manipulation spread through the collective like a plague. Peaceful species that had been absorbed centuries ago were suddenly remembering their capacity for violence. Dr. Lisa Park watched the transformation of her test subjects with growing horror and fascination. The infected humans were no longer just resistant to collective control. They were actively hunting down alien infiltrators with methods that combined human psychology with alien biotechnology. Subject 12 has developed the ability to cause mental breakdown in collective members through direct neural contact, she recorded. The subject describes this as teaching them to think like humans. The psychological damage to alien subjects is complete and irreversible. The subject in question was former teacher Mary Johnson, who had volunteered to be infected after her colony was attacked. Now she could touch an alien's mind and flood it with human concepts of paranoia, revenge, and existential dread until the creature's sanity shattered completely. "It's beautiful in a terrible way," Mary explained to Lisa. During an interview, "They tried to make us part of their peaceful collective. Instead, we're showing them that peace is an illusion. The universe is violent, and survival requires accepting that violence." Across the galaxy, the effect was spreading faster than the collective could contain it. 17 different species were breaking free from mental control, and each one was learning human methods of warfare. The peaceful empire that had taken centuries to build was collapsing in a matter of weeks. Captain Ryan Bell received reports from reconnaissance missions that seemed impossible. Entire collective worlds were in civil war as previously absorbed. Species turned against their masters. The galaxy's most successful empire was destroying itself from within, poisoned by exposure to human nature. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker, "we're receiving surrender offers from 12 different collective fleets. They're begging us to stop the psychological attacks." Admiral Cross considered the reports. Humanity had not just survived first contact. They had weaponized their own darkness and used it to break an interstellar empire. The question now was whether they could control what they had unleashed. 3 months after first contact, Colonel Alex Morgan stood on the bridge of a captured alien ship and watched the impossible happen. The massive bio-vessel that had once struck terror into human hearts now trembled under his feet as its alien crew tore each other apart in the corridors below. Status report. Alex called to his team of hybrid human soldiers. Deck 7 is secure, reported Sergeant Linda Hayes, her voice carrying through the ship's own communication system. Found 6 more collective commanders dead by their own hands. The rest are catatonic. Alex shook his head in amazement. His boarding party had not fired a single shot. They had simply walked onto the ship and found the crew in complete mental breakdown. The mighty Zethkai collective, conquerors of 17 worlds, had been reduced to gibbering madness by exposure to human thought patterns. The ship's bridge was a testament to alien engineering, with walls that pulsed like living tissue and control systems that responded to mental commands. But now it was a tomb. The ship's captain, a creature that had once been proud and powerful, lay curled in a corner, whimpering about voices in its head that would not stop screaming. "Sir," called Private Joe Adams, one of the few uninfected humans on the team. "We're receiving a transmission from the collective central command. They want to surrender." Alex almost laughed. The most powerful empire in the galaxy wanted to surrender to a species they had tried to absorb 3 months ago. But as he listened to the translated message, his amusement faded. "We yield to the Chaos Bringers," the alien voice said through the ship's speakers. "We cannot fight an enemy that turns our own unity against us. Your species carries darkness that burns through peaceful minds. We beg for mercy." But mercy was not what the infected humans had in mind. Across the galaxy, hybrid human forces were pursuing retreating collective fleets with a combination of alien technology and human ruthlessness that terrified even their own allies. Dr. Lisa Park studied the reports from her laboratory on Luna Base. The data showed a complete reversal of the original invasion pattern. The collective ships were no longer hunting humans. Instead, human-controlled vessels were hunting down alien fleets with devastating efficiency. The infected humans have learned to pilot collective bioships, she recorded in her daily log. They're using the ship's own biological systems against their creators. More concerning, they're displaying hunting behaviors that go beyond simple self-defense. The infected humans had indeed become something new. They retained their human memories and personalities, but their enhanced abilities and connection to the collective network had awakened something primal in their nature. They hunted aliens not just for survival, but for the pleasure of the hunt itself. Captain Ryan Bell commanded one of the hybrid vessels as it tracked a fleeing collective cruiser through the outer system. His crew was a mix of infected and normal humans, but they all shared the same predatory satisfaction as they closed in on their prey. "Target is trying to escape to hyperspace," reported Navigator Kate Wilson, her infected status evident from the blue lines under her skin. "Should we destroy them?" "No," Ryan replied, his voice cold. "Board them. I want to see what happens when we introduce their crew to some human history lessons." The boarding action was swift and brutal. The hybrid humans moved through the alien ship like apex predators, not killing their enemies, but capturing them alive. They dragged the terrified aliens to the ship's central chamber and connected them directly to the human neural network. What followed was psychological warfare at its most refined. The captured aliens were forced to experience human memories of war, genocide, and cruelty. But more than that, they were made to understand the human capacity for enjoying such acts. The aliens' peaceful minds could not process the concept of taking pleasure in another's suffering. Within hours, the entire crew was reduced to mental vegetables, their minds completely broken by exposure to human nature. The ship was added to the growing fleet of human-controlled vessels. Admiral Kevin Cross monitored the situation from Earth with growing concern. Humanity was winning the war, but the cost was becoming clear. The infected humans were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting because they enjoyed it. "We need to consider the long-term implications," he told his staff during a security briefing. The infected humans are not just our allies anymore. They're becoming something else entirely. The evidence was mounting. Across 17 worlds, the collective's previously absorbed species were not just breaking free from mental control. They were learning human methods of warfare and applying them with alien enhancements. The galaxy was becoming a more violent place, and humanity was the teacher. Dr. Amy Torres continued translating alien communications, but the messages had changed. Instead of panic about human psychological attacks, she was now hearing reports of formerly peaceful species committing acts of violence that would have been unthinkable before human contact. The peaceful species we once governed now speak of revenge, one translated message read. They have learned human concepts of hatred and apply them with scientific precision. The galaxy burns with new forms of war we cannot comprehend. The war was over. The collective had been defeated. But as Alex Morgan stood on the bridge of his captured ship, watching his hybrid crew hunt down the last fleeing aliens, he realized that something far more dangerous than the original invasion had been unleashed. Humanity had not just survived first contact. They had taught the galaxy to think like humans. And in a universe full of advanced alien technology, that was the most terrifying weapon of all. Captain Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon as it entered orbit around Zethkai Prime, the homeworld of the collective. 6 months ago, this planet had been the center of a peaceful empire spanning 17 worlds. Now it was a graveyard of broken dreams and shattered unity. Scanning the surface, reported Lieutenant Tom Baker, his voice tight with disbelief. Sir, the readings don't make sense. The planet's ecosystem is collapsing. Mass extinctions everywhere. Susan looked at the main screen and saw what had once been paradise. The collective had built their homeworld as a monument to peace and cooperation. Crystal cities rose from gardens that stretched to the horizon. Gentle rivers flowed between parks where different alien species had lived in harmony for centuries. Now those cities lay in ruins. The gardens burned with fires that would not die. The rivers ran red with blood from conflicts that should never have existed in a peaceful society. Take us down, Susan ordered. I want to see this for myself. The landing party consisted of both normal and infected humans. Dr. Lisa Park had insisted on joining the mission, despite the dangers. As Earth's leading expert on the collective, she needed to understand what humanity had done to their former enemies. The shuttle landed in what had been the planet's capital city. The crystal spires that once reached toward the sky lay broken, like shattered dreams. Bodies of different alien species littered the streets, but these were not casualties of human weapons. They had killed each other. The psychological contagion has spread beyond our control, Lisa whispered as she recorded her observations. The peaceful species are not just remembering violence. They're creating new forms of it. They walked through streets where beings who had lived together for centuries were now hunting each other with methods learned from human memory. A species of plant-like creatures had developed torture techniques based on human history. Aquatic beings were using psychological warfare to drive their neighbors insane. The most disturbing sight was the former collective processing center, where new species had once been peacefully integrated into the unity. Now it had been converted into something that made human war crimes look merciful. The freed species were using it to break down their former masters with systematic precision. They're not just fighting back, observed Sergeant Joe Adams, one of the uninfected humans on the team. They're enjoying it. Look at their faces. He was right. The alien faces showed expressions that had no equivalent in their original languages. They had learned to take pleasure in causing pain, a concept that had never existed in their peaceful evolution. Humanity had not just taught them violence. It had taught them to love violence. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Cross received reports that painted an increasingly dark picture of the galaxy. The 17 worlds once controlled by the collective were now in complete chaos. Species that had been peaceful for millions of years were applying human concepts of warfare with alien technology and scientific precision. "It's getting worse," he told President Janet Miller during their daily briefing. "The violence is spreading beyond the former collective territory. Peaceful species in neighboring systems are requesting our help to deal with refugees who carry human psychological patterns." The refugees were the problem. Beings who had escaped the chaos of the collective worlds carried with them the mental viruses that humanity had introduced. Wherever they settled, peace began to break down as local populations were exposed to human concepts of competition, aggression, and survival at any cost. Dr. Amy Torres had stopped translating alien communications. The messages were too disturbing. Species that had never known war were inventing weapons that combined their natural abilities with human creativity for causing suffering. The galaxy was learning to think like humans, and the results were beyond anything humanity had imagined. On Zethkai Prime, Susan's team reached the planet's central archive, where the collective had stored the memories and knowledge of 17 civilizations. The building still stood, but inside they found something that made even the infected humans step back in shock. The archive had been converted into a monument to human nature. The walls were covered with displays showing the worst moments in human history, but they were presented as teaching materials. The freed species were studying human warfare, human psychology, and human methods of control like students learning from a master. "They worship us," whispered Dr. Lisa Park, her voice filled with horror. "They think we're gods of war who came to liberate them from the weakness of peace." At the center of the archive sat a figure that had once been Hive Commander Kethron. The alien leader was no longer part of any collective. Its mind had been completely broken and rebuilt according to human patterns. When it saw the human landing party, it smiled with an expression of pure malice that looked wrong on its alien features. "Teachers," Kethron said in perfect English, "you have shown us the truth. Peace is slavery. Violence is freedom. We are your students now." Susan realized, with growing dread, that humanity had not just defeated the collective. They had corrupted it. The galaxy's most successful peaceful civilization had been turned into a mirror of humanity's darkest impulses. The war was over, but the real horror was just beginning. Humanity had looked into the abyss of alien conquest and found it lacking. But in defeating their enemies, they had created something far worse than the original threat. They had taught the galaxy to be human. 1 year after first contact, Lieutenant Commander Joe Adams walked through the halls of the hybrid colony ship called Liberation. The name was meant to be hopeful, but Joe felt only dread as he made his rounds. The ship was home to 300 infected humans who had once been ordinary colonists, farmers, and teachers. Now they were something else entirely. The ship's captain was Dr. Lisa Park, though she no longer went by that name. The other hybrids called her the Collective Breaker, and she had earned the title through methods that made Joe's stomach turn. She had personally broken the minds of over 1,000 alien captives, teaching them human concepts of fear and despair with scientific precision. "Commander Adams," Lisa said as Joe entered her command center. Her appearance had changed over the months. The blue lines under her skin now pulsed with darker energy, and her eyes held a coldness that had never been there before. Perfect timing. "We're about to begin the liberation of Sector 7. Joe looked at the tactical display and saw 12 peaceful worlds marked for liberation. Each planet was home to species that had never known war, never developed weapons, never learned to hate. In 6 months, the hybrid fleets had already liberated 43 such worlds. "Lisa," Joe said, using her old name deliberately, "these people don't need liberation. They're not part of the collective. They're just living. There lives in peace." Lisa smiled, and the expression was wrong on her face. It was too sharp, too predatory. Peace is an illusion, Joe. We learned that the hard way. Now we're teaching others the same lesson. The hybrid colonies had established their own empire among the stars, but it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not conquer worlds through military force. Instead, they arrived as teachers, offering to share human knowledge with peaceful civilizations. But the knowledge they shared was poison disguised as wisdom. On the planet New Harmony, former teacher Mary Johnson ran what she called educational programs for the local population. The aliens who attended her classes learned about human history, human psychology, and human methods of survival. Within weeks, their peaceful society began to collapse as they applied these lessons to their own lives. Today we're studying competition, Mary announced to her class of rabbit-like aliens who had never known conflict. Humans learn that resources are limited and only the strong survive. Let me show you why cooperation is a weakness that gets you killed. The aliens listened with growing fascination as Mary explained concepts of betrayal, manipulation, and strategic violence. These beings had evolved in a world of plenty, where cooperation had always been more effective than competition. But human. Ideas were seductive, and they began to see their peaceful ways as naive and foolish. Back on Earth, Admiral Kevin Cross read the reports from the hybrid colonies with growing alarm. The infected humans were not just spreading human knowledge. They were actively destroying peaceful civilizations by teaching them to think like humans. They're systematically breaking down every peaceful society they encounter, he told his staff during an emergency meeting. They call it liberation, but it's really conversion. They're turning the entire galaxy into a reflection of human nature. Dr. Rachel Stone, Earth's leading philosopher, had been studying the hybrid phenomenon for months. Her research painted a disturbing picture of what humanity had become. The infected humans had not lost their human nature. Instead, they had refined it, removing the restraints of morality and social cooperation that kept human violence in check. They represent pure human survival instinct, Rachel explained in her report to the World Council. All of our capacity for violence, competition, and dominance, but without the ethical frameworks that normally control these impulses. They're showing the galaxy what humans would be like if we only cared about winning. The galaxy was changing in ways that horrified even the humans who had started the transformation. Species that had lived in peace for millions of years were developing concepts of nationalism, racial superiority, and religious warfare. They were creating weapons not just to defend themselves, but to spread their newly learned aggression to other worlds. Lieutenant Commander Adams received regular reports from his reconnaissance missions. The former collective worlds had become laboratories of violence where freed species experimented with human concepts of hatred and revenge. They were improving on human methods, creating forms of warfare that were more efficient and more cruel than anything in Earth's history. "Sir," reported Sergeant Tom Baker during one mission briefing, "the Aquatic Coalition has developed something they call psychological drowning. They flood enemy minds with despair until the targets lose the will to live. They learned the technique from studying human depression and suicide rates. The most disturbing reports came from the edges of known space, where hybrid fleets had made contact with civilizations that had never heard of the collective or humanity. These ancient peaceful species were being introduced to human concepts for the first time, and the results were catastrophic. We're not liberating anyone," Joe said during his final meeting with Lisa Park. "We're destroying them. We're taking away everything that made them beautiful and replacing it with our ugliness." Lisa looked at him with something that might once have been sympathy. "Joe, you still don't understand. Beauty is weakness. Peace is vulnerability. We're not destroying them. We're saving them from the illusion that the universe is safe." As Joe left the Liberation for the last time, he realized that humanity had won the war against the collective by becoming something worse than their enemies had ever been. The galaxy was no longer threatened by peaceful unity. Instead, it was being consumed by the very darkness that had made humans such effective survivors. The infected humans called themselves liberators, but Joe knew the truth. They were missionaries of mankind's original sin, spreading the knowledge of good and evil to species that had been content with only good. 5 years after first contact, Ambassador Kate Wilson stood before the first Galactic Council meeting in the history of the known universe. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive chamber, but their faces showed the same expression of fear and disgust as they looked at her. "You call yourselves humans," said the speaker for the Crystal Federation, its voice ringing like breaking glass. "But we know your true name. You are the Darkness Bringers. You are the species that taught the galaxy to hate." Kate looked around the chamber at beings who had once lived in peace. The gentle aquatic coalition now wore armor made from the bones of their enemies. The plant-like Sylvan collective had learned to use poison as both weapon and art form. The crystal beings themselves had developed the ability to shatter minds with high-frequency thoughts of despair. "We defended ourselves," Kate said simply. "The Zethkai collective tried to absorb us. We fought back." "You did more than fight back," accused the representative from the Stellar Harmony Union. "You corrupted them. You turned their own unity against them. You taught them to enjoy causing pain." The accusations came from all sides. Species after species stood to describe how human influence had changed their worlds. They spoke of concepts that had never existed before human contact: revenge, sadism, psychological torture, the pleasure of domination. "Before you came," said an elder from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, "our greatest conflicts were over resource allocation. We solved problems through discussion and compromise. Now our children learn to lie, to betray, to take joy in the suffering of others." Kate listened to their words and felt something she had not expected: shame. But it was too late for shame. The damage was done, and humanity had to live with the consequences. Commander Jake Morrison, now head of Galactic Defense, received reports that painted a picture of a universe in chaos. The peaceful balance that had existed for millions of years was gone forever. In its place was a galaxy where every species was armed, paranoid, and ready for war. "The arms race is accelerating," he told President Janet Miller during their monthly briefing. "Species that never developed weapons technology are now building fleets. They're using human tactical manuals as their foundation, but they're improving on our methods." The improvement was the terrifying part. Alien minds, enhanced by their own natural abilities and human creativity, were developing forms of warfare that made Earth's military history look primitive. They had learned humanity's lessons too well. Dr. Rachel Stone published her final report on the human transformation of the galaxy. The document was titled "The Mirror of Contact," and it contained conclusions that shook human civilization to its core. "We looked for monsters in space and found gardeners," she wrote. "The Zethkai collective was not an evil empire seeking to destroy us. They were caretakers trying to maintain peace in a violent universe. They absorbed other species not to enslave them, but to protect them from the chaos of independent existence." The report revealed the truth that humanity had been unwilling to face. The collective had been the galaxy's immune system, containing and neutralizing violent tendencies wherever they appeared. They had successfully maintained peace across 17 worlds for centuries. "By destroying the collective," Rachel continued, "we did not free the galaxy. We infected it with the same psychological virus that makes humans such effective survivors. We taught peaceful species that violence is not only necessary, but enjoyable. The hybrid colonies had spread across the Neaceter galaxy like a plague of human thought. Wherever they went, they found peaceful civilizations and taught them to be afraid, to compete, to hate. They called it education, but the result was the systematic destruction of everything beautiful in the universe. On Earth, philosophers and politicians debated the meaning of humanity's victory. Some argued that they had saved the galaxy from stagnation, that peace without the ability to defend it was meaningless. Others claimed that humanity had committed the greatest crime in cosmic history by destroying the galaxy's innocence. But in the end, the debate did not matter. The change was irreversible. The galaxy would never again know the kind of peace that had existed before human contact. Commander Morrison stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital defense station, looking out at the stars. Each point of light now represented a world touched by human darkness. Species that had never known war were building weapons. Civilizations that had existed in harmony for millennia were tearing themselves apart with human concepts of nationalism and racial superiority. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker, "we're receiving another surrender offer. The Gentle Worlds Confederation wants to join the human sphere of influence. They say they need protection from the species we've already taught to fight." Morrison closed his eyes. Humanity had become the very thing the galaxy needed protection from, and now peaceful species were begging them for safety. It was the ultimate irony of human survival. They had won by making themselves indispensable to the chaos they had created. The final entry in Dr. Stone's journal captured the truth humanity struggled to accept. "We looked into the abyss of alien conquest and found it was only a mirror. The real abyss was always within us, waiting for the right moment to stare back. The aliens came with chaos and found something worse. They found humanity's gift for turning survival into an art form of calculated darkness. The galaxy had learned to think like humans. And in a universe full of advanced technology and ancient wisdom, that was the most terrifying lesson of all.